Welcome to There Is a Method to the Madness. I'm Rob Maxwell. I'm an exercise physiologist, and I'm going to give you a very brief introduction today because this is a very short podcast, but hopefully it's meaningful for you. I know it is for me. I always love this story. But before I get to the story, even though there's limited time, I'm going to thank our sponsors, Jonathan and Lynn Gilden. They are committed to providing the highest level of customer service, and they have the sales and the reviews to back that up. And they are the Gilden Group at Realty Pros, 386-451-2412. And then there is Overhead Door of Daytona Beach, Zach and Jeff Hawk, phenomenal sponsors of the show and the best garage door company in the area. They can be reached at overheaddoordaytona.com. All right, so now let's get into it. I'm going to tell you one of my favorite stories, and hopefully you enjoy it as much as I do. Years and years and years ago, I worked as a residential counselor at the residential adolescent program at Stewart Treatment Center, which is a drug and rehabilitation facility here in Daytona Beach. And this was before it was Stuart Marchman, before Hal Marchman, the great Hal Marchman, by the way, who is passed and such an iconic figure, Daytona Beach, so charitable. But this is before his time. This is when we were Stewart Treatment Center. And it's the same facility now. But I worked there. I was getting my psychology degree, and that's what I thought I wanted to go into. And I'm really glad I did. As I've said before, I love my psych degree. I love this time spent working with the kids, and grew up with a lot of addiction issues in my own family. And so it was like a second home for me. And I learned so many valuable lessons myself as I was trying to teach and mentor young kids. And my boss at the time's name was John Mullins, and I don't know his whereabouts anymore, but I know he left an impression on me. I don't know what he had degree-wise. I'm guessing like a master's in social work or something like that. But he was in charge of the entire residential adolescent program. And he was a Vietnam vet that was back from Vietnam. And, so he had those stories and all those memories as well. And just a great mentor, and I really learned tough love from him. And that is what, I really believe we need in my industry, to be an effective trainer. So one day we took the kids, and I don't know, there was probably 18 to 20 adolescents under our care. And we took them to the St. John's Forest over in Ocala. No, St. John's Sheriff's Youth Camp in Ocala. That's what it was. But it was in the Ocala National Forest. And he used to love to do stuff like this. And this is back before it was cool to do it. This was in the late 80s. Wow. Really, really dating myself here. So this is before those things became popular things to do, which is take people out to, the wilderness and, make them face things like that. It was long before it was cool, and he just did it because he really thought it was important for people to get out and, be out in nature and stuff. It was just part of what he did. So we were out there, and we were hiking as we always did. And you can imagine kids that are, just not too far from detoxing, and then some kids who had been there a little longer. A lot of them were court-ordered. So you can imagine if you know anything about either court-ordered kids or kids that are recovering from substance abuse, they're not always in the best moods and don't always really want to be doing what you want them to do. Because, if you know anything about addicts and alcoholics, even though they're in treatment and many of them court-ordered, they think they know more. It's just the way it is, So we were marching through the old woods there, and there's probably 5 counselors plus Mr. Mullins and the kids. And, we would scatter ourselves around and make sure all the kids were watched after, because they did have to be watched. I mean, they could abscond. It would happen. You don't want to lose one in the woods. Thankfully that never happened under my watch. But you got to watch them. They could find things. They could find cigarettes on the ground. All these things were off limits. So, we had to keep a careful eye. And we got to a place where he wanted to stop and talk, and he was a great storyteller. So he gathered everybody around, and he was wearing, like he always wore, because again, he's a retired Vietnam veteran, so he always wore his fatigues. He always wore his army pants and his jackets, and sometimes even the hats. That's just what he was comfortable doing. My guess would be he lived in the woods. I don't know, but that was his look. It was a good look on him too, by the way. So he pulled us all aside, and we're in this big circle, and counselors, which most of us were pretty young ourselves, very early 20s, and gosh, I might even been 19 at the time. I don't remember. But he points out in the distance, and he says, so right about over there, I saw this deer, and he was a beautiful deer, and he was frolicking over there, and he's telling the story. He says, this is probably like 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And I love animals, so I put my fingers out like you would if you're calling a cat, or and he was making the smoochy noise. He's going, come here, doing that kind of thing, and he's imitating what he did, and he says he was able to attract. And he said, might I digress? He repeated that he had his camera in his hands at the time because he loved to photograph animals and nature. So he had his camera. So then so getting back to the kissy faces. So he's doing all that, and then he's going, come on, come on, come on. And finally, he said the deer wandered over close to him, and, he put his hand out, and he's telling the story, and he's telling it really low, and, we're all in, and he can tell a story, man, let me tell you. So we're like engaged. And us counselors got just as much out of it, probably more than the kids, because we were probably in a better frame of mind to hear it. But anyway, so real quiet, he says, so then I lifted up my camera, and I smashed it on the deer's nose, and it yips, and it runs away as fast as we can. And, we're all just like startled, and our mouths are wide open. I'm looking at the other counselors, and I'm thinking, what, what, man? And I don't know why my Siri just did that, but I'm like, why on earth is this a good story? But in typical Mullins fashion, he brought it back around. He says, so what I did was I saved that deer's life because I never wanted that deer to get comfortable around a human being in fatigues holding something in its hand. And of course, then I'm imagining, what a hunter looks like holding a gun. He was holding a camera. He says, I didn't want that deer to get comfortable because if it gets comfortable, it's going to stop, it's going to get closer, and it's going to die, and I just don't personally want that. I want these deer to not have to suffer that kind of death, so I had to suffer my own form of death so this deer can live, meaning that deer now had to no longer like me or trust me. So I had to deal with that pain of doing that to save its life. And it was not easy because naturally I just wanted to pet the deer and feed the deer, but I more preferred to save the deer. So I had to sacrifice that relationship to save the deer. So that story has always stuck with me. And it's a brilliant story. And no, nobody likes to slap a deer. I'm sure it hurt for a second. The point is he saved its life. In effective personal training and effective health coaching and all these things, sometimes we have to slap people on the nose. And it's the only time people care. All right? So, little story. I only had 10 minutes of this to use up today, and I wanted to use it by telling a great story. Hope you enjoyed it. Please download these episodes. Please share them to people that you think may like them. And I appreciate all of you that listen. All right? Take care.